We've got to get Senator Baldwin's name card, and then we're ready to go. Anyway, it's so wonderful to be joined here today by my colleagues with more to come. Senator Warren, as you know, has been such a leader on this issue, and Senator Baldwin. We have two of our major leaders here today, right on time, like you would do in a college class, right? I am Amy Klobuchar. I'm the chair of the steering committee, and this is a forum that we put together, and it's so great to see so many teachers and students and reform advocates out there. Having you here means a lot, and we put this together because we think there needs to be much more focus on this issue. There's hearings on everything these days, and we think we need to have more hearings on this important issue of student debt. For the students of the class of 2015 who graduated last spring, the 6-month grace period on federal student loans will soon expire, and that means that these students have to start making some painful decisions about how they can afford the monthly payments on their student debt. On average, graduates leave school with roughly $30,000 in student debt. Collectively, that is almost more. When I had just almost paid off my student debt, and met my husband, and he had even more than that, but I married him anyway. For those of you, I wanted to just give you some hope going forward. But that is a lot of money. That's the average, and collectively, more than 40 million students have amassed student debt that exceeds $1.3 trillion nationally. The debt and the monthly interest and principal payments it requires for years and sometimes decades after school has ended. By some estimates, since the 1970s, the cost of college has increased by more than 1,000%. In recent decades, the cost of two-year college, which is so important for so many of our students, has doubled, and four-year college has tripled. Even two-year colleges to obtain an associate degree require students to take on debt. Costs in many cases have increased beyond any reasonable effort on the part of families to save or students to work their way through college. And far too often, the debt that's required to attend college does not lead to the well-paying job as advertised. Making matters worse, we have some unscrupulous actors out there scamming students, cheating borrowers, trying to stick the American people with the bill. And so there's a lot of reasons to hold this forum today to underscore the depth and the scope of the problem and the need for action. We're fortunate to have here today, in addition to these great senators, the former Assistant Director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau for Student Loans, and that is Rohit Chopra. I said it right. I really worked on that hard, so that was good. We also have Jen Mishory with the Young Invincibles, who I've heard testify before, and she does a great job. Both of these experts are widely respected for their analysis and their knowledge on these issues. As well, I'm pleased to welcome several participants to share their personal stories. Annie Wood is here from Minneapolis. She's a recent college graduate who wants to enter public service and whose grace period on her federal loans expires in December. Emily Best, right next to her, is a farm operations manager at New Morning Farm in South Central Pennsylvania, who hopes to own her own farm someday, but is struggling in saving enough money and access credit because of student debt. And this is, by the way, we need more young people to go into farming. We actually have a lot of job openings in the rural part of my state, many of them in agriculture, yet the student debt is slowing them down or making them make different decisions about going back home and running the farms. And as we know, the average age of the farmer is getting really old, and that's why it's important to look at this piece of the action as well. And then finally, Jess Sanchez, who's a single father with a 10-year-old son. He's a first-generation college student and a first-year elementary school teacher in California. So thank you all for coming, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Senator Warren.
Thank you very much, Senator Klobuchar. Thank you for calling this meeting today. I am so glad to be here to join everyone for this. And I want to say thank you to everyone, our panelists and everyone in this audience today who is here to raise your voice on the issue of student loan debt. November is debt month. 2 weeks from today, on November 9th, more than 125,000 borrowers will begin repaying their student loans. 125,000 people in a single day. The following Monday, another 100,000 people will enter repayment, and on and on. Altogether, almost 1 million student loan borrowers will receive their first student loan bill during the upcoming month of November. That is 1 million more borrowers who will be hit with the hard reality of student loan debt, who will make life decisions, change their plans, and settle into years of indebtedness right at the beginning of their working lives. How much will they pay? Well, Congress has set the interest rates on these loans so high that the government is raking in billions of dollars in profits from the student loan program. Take a look at just the loans that were issued between 2007 and 2012. For just that one slice of loans, the federal government is on target to make $66 billion in profit. This is obscene. The federal government should be helping students get an education, not making a profit off their backs. The debt burden has grown so big that in just 1 year, total student loan debt, just over the last 12 months, has increased by $86 billion. And next month, nearly 1 million more people will get on the debt treadmill, signing over a chunk of their earnings to pay off on their educations. For 2 years now, Democrats have tried to get a bill through Congress to lower the interest rate on student loans. And as the Republicans have filibustered, students have paid and paid and paid. Take a look at the most recent crop of borrowers, those who started repaying their loans between the summer of 2014 and the summer of 2015. The Education Department estimates that that one group alone will pay $655 million more dollars in student loan interest in just 1 year than they would have if Congress had acted to lower their interest rates. Think about what that $655 million could have meant to young people across this country who are trying to start their lives. You know, borrowing for college used to be a rare occurrence, but now with the costs of college spiraling out of control and more young people aware that they need to get post-high school training if they want to have a shot at the middle class, nearly 70% of college students are borrowing money to make it through. A generation ago, when young people needed help to go to college, America invested in them. Public colleges and universities offered high-quality education, with the taxpayers picking up most of the cost. Federal grants covered a large part of college tuition for low-income students. Federal student loans were subsidized. Barely a generation ago, debt-free college was a real option for millions of students. And for the relatively small numbers who had to borrow, the government gave those students subsidies to help keep costs low. Now, costs are up in this country because this country has cut support for public universities. 3 out of 4 college students are in public schools, and a generation ago, taxpayers supported those public schools, paying about $3 out of $4 that it took to educate those students. Now, those numbers have reversed. Average state funding has been cut, and states now pay only about 1 in 4 of the dollars of the cost, shoving the rest off to students and pushing them into high-cost loan programs that yield billions of dollars in profits for the federal government. Make no mistake, This country is digging itself into an economic hole. Our economy cannot flourish if we do not have enough college-educated workers. But to get a college education, students must now take on debt that keeps them from making the purchases that keep our economy strong. In other words, degrees push us forward, but debt holds us back. This is about more than economics. This is a moral issue. When we refuse to invest in our young people, when we shortchange their education, when we yoke them to 20 years or more of debt repayments, and when we make a profit off those debts, then we have failed as a country in one of our most important obligations. We have failed to invest in the future of our young people, and we should feel the shame of that. It is time to make change, and I am glad to be here with the people who are going to help us lead that change. And with that, I'll pass to Senator Baldwin.
Okay, and I would note that Senator Baldwin, in addition to Senator Warren's bill that many of us are co-sponsors on to reduce the interest, we also have Senator Baldwin has a significant bill on community colleges.
Well, I want to thank both of you for leading this discussion today, and all of you for being here and giving voice to such an important crisis in our nation. As was just so eloquently said, higher education should be a path to prosperity, not a path to suffocating debt. And we know how many incredibly horrible implications there are. We heard about the drag on the economy. There's also obviously the way in which it affects career choices and family choices, et cetera. I am proud to have introduced a couple of pieces of legislation that I just want to add to this discussion as we tackle the debt burden that graduates have are shouldering. We also need to look ahead at future generations who need to access higher education. And I introduced this July America's College Promise Act to make the first 2 years of community college or technical college tuition-free, and to provide an affordable pathway for low-income students to then transition into a 4-year college degree program. Last month, I also introduced the Working Student Act, which would allow students who have to work while they're in college to complete their degrees to do so more quickly and with less debt. It gets rid of the work penalty that's embedded in our current financial aid laws. These are obviously straightforward plans, paths that would go a long way to address the crisis that is plaguing our students and their families. And I know that it's been frustrating for us. It's twice or 3 times or 1,000,000 times more frustrating for you to see how slowly this debate has unfolded in the Congress of the United States. But I wanted to add just one more note, because it's one thing to fail to pass new legislation. It is another thing to let a very important loan program expire under our watch. And the senators joining us at this dais today have been fighting tooth and nail to extend the federal Perkins loan program, which expired on September 30th of this year. I have twice gone to the floor and asked unanimous consent for the Senate to pass the House-passed bill that extends that program for 1 year. Obviously, it needs to be made permanent, reauthorized again in a more permanent fashion. But this is a program that has, since 1958, provided low-income students with low-interest loans to help them make it through their college education. And we have to redouble our efforts to get that job done also. Thank you again for convening us and allowing this discussion.
Well, thank you. And I hadn't asked them to speak, but I think we don't have a glass ceiling. I should ask the male senators to say a few words. So one of our great leaders, Senator Durbin, if you'd like to add a few words.
Madam Chair, it's so kind of you to allow those of us on, what, it wouldn't be the fairer sex, it would be the something, I don't know.
Don't even go there.
I'm not going to touch it. I'm going to get into politically incorrect territory quickly. I associate myself with the remarks that were made by my colleagues. Let me add two things that I think are important for this conversation. There is also an element here of feeding the beast. The question is not whether we extend more and more opportunity for you to borrow money and get deeper in debt, even if we can find better terms for you to repay it, but whether or not this spiraling increase in the cost of higher education needs to be addressed directly, and I think it should. Yesterday's New York Times had a lead editorial on what's happening with for-profit law schools. Now that we've taken the cap off, which you can borrow for graduate courses, they have decided they're going to just charge to the heavens in terms of tuition for worthless law school degrees. Second issue, for-profit schools. This is going to be on the finals, so you may want to get out your pens. Three numbers. 10% of all the students graduating from high school go to for-profit colleges and universities. 10. 20% of all the federal aid to education goes to for-profit colleges and universities. 20, because they're so expensive. 40. 40% of all student loan defaults are students at these for-profit colleges and universities. We have seen many of these operations starting to fail and some teetering on bankruptcy. The stock market's finally catching up with them. They are recruiting students not ready for college who can't finish, and it's catching up with them. In the meantime, this $37 billion federal subsidy to the for-profit colleges and universities would be the 9th largest federal agency were it a separate appropriation. I call it crony capitalism, but come to think of it, somebody stole that to blame another agency. The point I want to get to is we look at this, let's look at the whole picture. Let's make sure we give students a fighting chance to get debt-free education. Let's make sure those that are in debt have a way to get out of it in a sensible and thoughtful way. Let's make sure the colleges and universities know they have a responsibility here, whether it's in the tuition they charge or the bookstores where they gouge you for $1,000 a year or more. There are a lot of ways that we can help students get affordable education. I'm glad we're having a hearing.
Very good. Thank you very much. Senator Murphy from
Thank you very much.
Connecticut.
Thank you very much, Senator Klobuchar. Thank you all for being here today. I want to get to your testimony. So this is a very deeply personal issue for me. I'm one of the few members of the Senate that's still paying back my student loans. And I've got 2 little kids at home, and I'm hoping to be able to save enough to defray some of their expenses as well. There's not a day that goes by that I feel sorry for myself when it comes to the amount of money I make, but what I know is that I represent this generation that is squeezed between paying back their own student debts and furiously saving money for their children's education. That is one way of explaining why you have a general savings deficit amongst families in their 30s and 40s and 50s today, why the average 50-year-old today has less than $25,000 saved for retirement, because more and more of every dollar that you can scrape to save goes to pay back your student lenders or get ready for your kids' education. And so I just want to reflect on the comments of Senator Durbin. I know that students are held accountable for your debts. Why do I know that? Because it's one of the few debts that can't be discharged in bankruptcy, so you're stuck with them. But schools aren't held accountable for the degrees that they give. We have $140 billion in federal aid that we give out today, and we're going to argue that it should be more. But there are virtually no strings attached to that money that we dispense. Dropout factories continue to get that $140 billion. Schools that advertise worthless degrees that have no chance of actually landing you a job continue to get that $140 billion. Schools that make a living off of getting you in the door, churning you through high-volume classes, and then trusting that you will drop out before you actually start to cost them money, continue to get that $140 billion. So Senator Durbin and myself and a handful of others introduced legislation 2 years ago that would start to provide some of that accountability. And as much as we're going to argue for more resources for students, we're going to argue for less resources for schools that aren't providing a quality, affordable education to students to try to drive the industry towards quality and allow for students to get there a little bit more easily. So thank you for having this today, Senator Klobuchar.
Well, thank you very much. Well, let's start with our witnesses that are here today for our forum. We'll start with you, Mr. Chopra. As I mentioned, he is the Senior Fellow at the Center for American Progress, and before that, he was the Assistant Director and Student Loan Ombudsman for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, something I believe Senator Warren knows a little bit about. So why don't we get us? Did she hire you?
She did, actually.
Okay, all right, good. Okay, I thought we should get that out there as a
Disclosures.
Potential conflict, a real conflict. Okay, go ahead.
Senator Klobuchar and distinguished members, thank you for holding this forum today. Young people with student debt in America face two serious challenges. First, too many are finding that their debt is obstructing the American dream. And second, they feel that their government is simply watching from the sidelines. New graduates entering the workforce are now trying to make the climb to their next milestone, to buy a home, start a family, or start a small business. But today, unlike their debt-free peers, many student debtors feel like they're climbing up an escalator, but it's running in the wrong direction. No matter how hard they work, they feel like they're simply moving in place. But increasing debt levels aren't coming with higher wages. There's a lot of talk about the growing college wage premium, the $1 million that college grads earn in excess of those who went to high school. But here's the sad reality. From 2000 to 2015, inflation-adjusted wages for young college grads actually went down. And the college wage premium is only growing because everyone else's wages are in free fall. These flat wages combined with more debt means more risk and less wealth. It means scraping together that first down payment takes longer, contributions to retirement plans are lower, and saving for the next generation's college education is even harder. Just this month, the National Association of Realtors reported that 78% cited student debt as the top obstacle to homeownership. A Gallup poll revealed that 1 in 5 recent grads are delaying a small business start due to student debt. And while it's important to address the next generation of borrowers, we can't forget the 43 million on the hook today. Now, a lot of politicians in Washington claim to want to help students and their families. But to me, it's just a bunch of hot air unless they support some key principles. First, we need to keep student loan interest rates and college tuition in check. Corporate America and Wall Street have locked in low rates, but too many of our borrowers are stuck. Second, we need to clean up the student loan servicing industry. There are now 8 million Americans in default on a student loan, and that's millions too many. And servicers are cutting corners instead of counseling borrowers on their options when they're struggling. We were late to the game on addressing failures in the mortgage servicing industry, so let's not make the same mistake twice. And third, we need to support and defend the CFPB. Director Cordray and my former colleagues at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau have recovered hundreds of millions of dollars for hundreds of thousands of students. They've shut down so-called debt relief providers, sued for-profit colleges for predatory lending and ruthless debt collection tactics, and helped thousands of Americans get help through its award-winning consumer complaint system. Student loan borrowers and honest companies need the CFPB. But that's just a start. It's time to shake up our student loan system so that it's working for all of us. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chopra. Next, we have Jen Mishory, and she is the Executive Director and founding staff member of the Young Invincibles. She has conducted extensive research and authored numerous reports on health, higher education, and economic issues facing the millennial generation.
Thank you so much, Senator Klobuchar and members of the steering committee for the opportunity to appear here today. As we move closer toward HEA reauthorization, it's exciting to see so many voices talking about the importance of reducing costs, increasing quality, and easing debt burdens in our higher education system. Now more than ever, we must have a comprehensive plan for one, how we as a country finance college costs to ensure that higher education is within reach for today's students, and two, how we help over 40 million student loan debtors manage over $1.2 trillion in student debt. That staggering number is double the amount of credit card debt that we have in this country, and it has an enormous impact on millions of young people across the country. 1 in 5 young adults live with a parent, partly because paying rent is often impossible if you carry $30,000 in debt, which is the average amount for a debtor today. And with high interest rates on many of these loans and no current feasible refinancing options, those holding debt can often feel like they are getting nowhere on payments. As a result, we hear from former students all the time that their debt means delaying major life decisions, like buying a car, taking out a mortgage, or even getting married. In addition to the consequences for individuals, this takes a real toll on our entire economy, impacting engagement in the type of economic activity that spurs growth. It didn't used to be this way. Since 1978, tuition and fees have increased over 1,000%, rising by nearly 40% in real terms in the past decade alone, primarily due to a decrease in state spending per student. In 1979, the average student could work 182 hours, which is roughly the equivalent of a part-time minimum wage summer job, to pay for a year's tuition. In 2013, it took 991 hours, roughly the equivalent of a full-time minimum wage job for half the year, to accomplish the same. These explosive increases have dramatically undermined the system that served previous generations. Earlier this year, Young Invincibles released an agenda to address these trends. We lay out the steps needed to make higher education more affordable, higher quality, and set to achieve better outcomes after graduation. In other words, the 21st century makeover to the higher education system that we've yet to tackle. Broadly, these reforms first give a pathway to a debt-free degree. We do this by identifying reforms that decrease costs and expand student supports, such as increasing Pell Grants, creating a state-federal financing partnership, helping young parents as they try and balance childcare and attending school, and making the financial aid process easier to navigate. Second, we call for disrupting our current system by overhauling how we think about accountability and quality, cutting off bad actors from wasting taxpayer dollars and ruining lives, and providing the data and information to students and families that they need to make choices about where they should attend school and what to study. Third, we propose cutting debt payments for borrowers. This plan cuts existing monthly payments by as much as 70% for the typical debtor through an expansion of income-based repayment and through increasing refinance options, such as the proposal brought forward by Senator Warren, while tackling many of the challenges we have seen with loan servicers and other poor consumer protections in the industry. Fixing our higher education system will require action from all stakeholders: smart investments by the state and federal government, better performance by institutions, and reforms to our draconian laws facing struggling debtors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here, and I'm excited for the discussion.
Well, thank you very much. Now we have some examples of actual real-world situations to illustrate the numbers and the facts that you have given us. And the first is Annie Wood. No surprise, she is a graduate, 2015 graduate from the University of Minnesota. Yes, I know it's a surprise to you. And she actually is the daughter of 2 Minneapolis public school teachers. My daughter went to the Minneapolis public schools for quite a while. And Annie chose the University of Minnesota because it was lower cost and she wanted to pursue a career in public service. And despite working during the school year and summer for all 4 years of college, she has graduated with nearly $50,000 in student loan debt. So Annie, tell us your story.
Good afternoon. My name is Annie Wood, and I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota, where I attended the University of Minnesota. Thank you, Senators, for having me here today. As Senator Klobuchar said, I'm the proud daughter of 2 Minneapolis public school teachers. I chose the University of Minnesota because it's a great school, but also because it was the lowest cost option of my choices, being a public university with in-state tuition. I graduated in the spring of 2015 with a double major in political science and global studies. I was also a Spanish studies minor. I had a great experience and made the large university feel small by finding different communities on campus. I engaged in service learning, education policy, and political groups on campus. I also needed to get a job in order to cover living expenses. I worked all 4 years of college, including work study and summer jobs. Despite working all 4 years, I have almost $50,000 worth of debt. $36,000 is federal student loans serviced by Navient with an interest rate of 6.2%. The rest is a mix of private student loans from a credit union and Minnesota state loans. One is a self-loan through the Minnesota Office of Higher Education with a 6.5 interest rate serviced by First Mark Services. My private loan has a staggering interest rate of 9.8%. Without the option to refinance the interest rates of these loans, I'm locked into high monthly payments. My grace period ends, and I must begin paying back all of my loans on December 8th. I plan to enroll in public service loan forgiveness to help afford my loans, as well as the pay-as-you-earn program to help lower my monthly payments. Without these options, my payments would be almost $600 a month. With pay-as-you-earn, the monthly payment on my federal loans is a little lower, so I'll be able to lower my payments on all my loans to around $460 per month. It helps, but it's not enough. I don't know how I can pay down these loans. The countdown to paying this debt is affecting my life by adding financial strains and stress. I work for a nonprofit, and after rent, utilities, food, and metro fare, there's very little left over. When I start paying my loans in December, I won't be able to put away money into my savings. I'm also looking to take on a part-time job for evenings and weekends. It's a difficult road ahead. However, I know I'm in good company. My friends here in DC are also recent graduates, and most are at nonprofits. Some are planning to enroll in public service loan forgiveness and take second jobs. I felt that my options and mobility are limited and wonder at what point I'll be able to actually save for things like a house, a car, or a family. Living as a broke college student is one thing, but I don't see a period of financial stability in my life for the foreseeable future. That doesn't feel so great after working diligently and living frugally for the past 4 years at a public college in state. I also know that while this struggle is my own, my parents have also taken on plenty of responsibility to help me and my 2 siblings go to college. My dad is a middle school social studies teacher, and my mom is a social worker at a high school. My parents have both worked during the summer for the past several years and continue to help in any way they can with our college expenses. Despite their hard work, each member of my family will have their own fair share of college debt. It's heartbreaking. I feel that the system is so wrong. College costs are so out of control that 2 teachers have to take on work in the summer when school years already demand so much of them. Every year, more and more students are graduating with spiraling levels of debt. The class of 2015 graduated with the most student debt in history. I worry for my little brother, who's currently a sophomore at the University of Minnesota. He's paying $12,240 for in-state tuition at school this year. In 2 years, when he graduates, he will be yet another individual struggling with student debt. Thank you for your time and attention to this issue.
Well, thank you for that story, Annie, and thank you for continuing to pursue public service despite that debt. Emily Best, as I mentioned, is in her 4th season as an apprentice at New Morning Farm, which is a vegetable farm in central Pennsylvania. She also served in the Peace Corps in Senegal and has an MA from American University. Emily Best.
Hi, Chairman Klobuchar, Senator Warren, and the rest of the committee. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate today. As you said, I'm an apprentice farmer at New Morning Farm. We grow diversified organic vegetables, and I manage seedling production. I oversee several crops from transplant to harvest to final sale. I maintain our social media, and I manage our stand at the DuPont Circle Farmers Market every Sunday. I started working there in 2012 after completing graduate school. I planned to work for a summer and then move back here to DC for a job in agricultural policy. But by the end of that season, I'd fallen in love with farming. So I stayed, and I'm not the only one. This season at New Morning Farm, we had a 100% retention rate for apprentices. We apprentices, all under the age of 33, manage the farm day to day. Yet I wonder, how many of us will remain farmers? The average American farmer is 58 years old. We desperately need young apprentices like my coworkers and me to become lifelong farmers. My student loans are one of the biggest barriers standing between me and starting my own farm. My student loan debt, combined with my low income typical of beginning farmers, prevent me from accessing the lines of credit I would need to start my own farm. Starting a new farm is an expensive and risky endeavor. A farmer needs secure land tenure, equipment, seeds, and other capital-intensive investments. I'd likely need an operating loan to cover these expenses until my crop grows. Only Farm Credit and USDA's Farm Service Agency will loan to new farmers. But my negative net wealth essentially forecloses the option of Farm Credit, and the FSA will only loan as much as a farmer can afford to pay back each month. Student loan payments are income that cannot be leveraged for the necessary farm loan. To go to graduate school, what I thought would be a good financial decision, I acquired over $70,000 in public loans. Now, after consolidating, my interest rates vary between 4.5% and a staggering 8.25%. I feel I will never be able to catch up. I sometimes envision my loans as a dark cloud hovering over me, pursuing me, telling me that I cannot get married, buy a house, or take financial risks like investing in or purchasing my own farm. I've considered switching jobs just to pay off my loans, but I believe strongly in the value of my work, and so do my customers. I'm feeding people, and I'm taking care of one of America's greatest assets, farmland. For me, knowing there was an end in sight to my student loan debt would allow me to consider buying my own farm. As it stands, I do not feel I can responsibly take on even more debt on such a risky endeavor as becoming a farm owner. One way to address this challenge is to add farmers to the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. Adding farmers could serve as a significant incentive for more young people to enter agriculture. As our current crop of farmers age, we are relying on young people to step up. We need to help them manage their student loans to do so.
Thank you very much. Next, Jess Sanchez. Jess, as I mentioned, is a teacher. He is the first-year teacher of fifth graders at Chapman Heights Elementary School in California. He has $91,000. I guess you get our prize here today, I hate to tell you, in student debt from earning his bachelor's degree and master's degree in education, both obtained at a state university, at California State University in San Bernardino. He is a single father to Andrew. Thank you for being here, Jess.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairwoman Klobuchar, Senator Warren, and the distinguished committee members for the opportunity to speak today on the critically important issue of student debt. Not only is it impacting millions of students and families, it is harming our nation's economy. My name is Jess Sanchez. I am a proud member of the National Education Association and former president of the student chapter of the California Teachers Association. This is my first year teaching. I teach amazing fifth graders at Chapman Heights Elementary School in Yucaipa, California. I had to take out $91,000 in student loans to pay for my bachelor's degree in liberal studies and my master's degree in education with a focus on reading and language arts, both from California State University in San Bernardino. As a teacher, I earn $50,000 a year, so it'll take me a long time to pay back that money, 25 years at my current rate. Becoming a teacher is a major accomplishment for someone like me. I grew up in Casablanca, California, where statistics say I was more likely to die young, as my cousins did, than to earn a master's degree. I dreamed of owning my own house, but I was turned down for a mortgage because my student loan debt was so big. I was turned down for a car loan for the same reason. I became a teacher because I want to inspire and empower the next generation. I strive to fill the souls of my students with hope and inspiration, to help put them on a path to a bright and prosperous future. It thrills me to think that I could be educating the next president of the United States or the doctor who will find a cure for cancer. I am a single father. My first student was my son, Andrew. He's my heart. He's 10 years old now and will forever be my student. I had hoped to be able to pay for his education so that, unlike me, he could graduate from college debt-free. Now I know that that's impossible. Money I could have saved for his education must now be used to pay for my own loans. I've got 70 more students, 2 classes of 35. I want for them the same thing I want for my son, a future in which they will have a chance to achieve their dreams, to go to college and not be swimming in debt afterwards. I find it painful to tell them the truth. No matter how hard you work, you are unlikely to get an affordable college education the way things are now. This year, Congress is beginning to work on the reauthorization of the Higher Education Act. As you do so, it is vitally important to address the issue of affordability, especially for low-income students, to enable students from backgrounds like mine to complete college without crippling debt and succeed afterwards. Hopefully, through the leadership of those of you in this room, we can increase need-based federal aid like Pell Grants, allow students to refinance their loans at a lower interest rate, and expand loan forgiveness programs, especially for people who choose careers in public service as I did. I worry that we will lose future educators if the issue of student debt is not addressed. They will choose other professions because they fear of being deeply in debt for decades. We owe it to our children and to their children to make the dream of a college education an affordable reality for everyone. I came here today hoping that you will help make that possible. Students and family deserve degrees, not debt. Thank you again for this opportunity and for your leadership on this important issue.
Thank you very much, all of you, and especially thank you, Mr. Sanchez, for that touching testimony. My mom was a second grade teacher, and they had no money in their family, and she was able to go to school in Wisconsin at Milwaukee State Teachers College, and that's how she was able to afford it, because she had nothing like your experience. They basically invested in teachers back then. So I guess I'd start with you and let you know that what you are talking about is borne by so many people in this country. In fact, a recent Gallup poll showed that paying for a child's education is the #1 financial concern of U.S. parents, more worrisome than paying for emergency medical bills and saving for retirement. My question of you is, how closely does that reflect your thinking as you try to pay down your student debt while caring for your son's future?
That is one of the main concerns I have right now, is trying to figure out how I'm going to put my son through college. He has aspirations to go to Stanford, MIT. He loves science. He loves math. And that's something that he's passionate about. And I think every day, how am I going to help him pay for this? In reality, he's thinking at 10 years old, how is he going to help me pay back my debt? And there are times when he's in tears because he's trying to figure out, how can I help you, Dad? He goes, if it wasn't for you to go to college, for you to give me a better life, you wouldn't have this debt. And it's hard for me to understand, to fathom that a 10-year-old would think this way. He's seen me present on degrees, not debt. He's seen me do things, so he knows what it's like. He sees me going out there in California and doing the work. And now he's starting to internalize it, to feel like it was his fault. And in reality, it's not. It's him that pushed me to become a teacher. It was him that pushed me to be the best I can, to show him that it's achievable. And now my fight has just begun, to push for college affordability and work with everybody I can to make sure that college is affordable for everyone.
Very good. Thank you. Annie, the grace period on your student loans expires in December, right, of this year. It's right around the corner. And you talked about what you're facing, and even if you do that program, the reduction, how much that is. So how are you going to be able to do this, even if you get it down to $400 some a month?
So I think what's going to have to happen is I am not going to be able to save the amount that I've been saving since I started this job, which is pretty scary because thinking long term, I won't really see my savings grow. But that money will have to shift to student loan payments, particularly because the private and state loan.
Are you talking about like 401ks, or what are you talking about?
And just general savings. Yes, general savings for whatever thing is down the road. But in addition to retirement savings, I haven't really had the chance to figure out how that will work either.
Okay. Ms. Mishory, in your higher education promise plan that you talked about, you mentioned several items to create a pathway to a debt-free degree, expanding Pell Grants, state-federal partnerships, helping young parents to balance childcare and school. Your report says that Pell Grants cover less than 1/3 of the cost of a four-year college degree today, compared to the 1980s when they covered half the cost. What could we do to change that, and what can the executive agencies do that they're not already doing?
So we have some great proposals out there, actually, that look at tying the Pell Grant to the average in-state tuition. That's something that Young Invincibles has supported. Also making sure that Pell Grants are available year-round so that students are able to get through school more quickly. So really increasing our investments in the Pell Grant, but at the same time making sure that states are reinvesting on their side. So right now, about 47 states still invest less in higher education than they did before the Great Recession. And so thinking about how we can create a federal-state partnership that actually encourages increased investment on the state side so that we have states and the federal government doing their part.
Your report also says that state budget cuts are estimated to be responsible for 78% of tuition hikes, with increased spending on administration, operations, construction. That's the remaining 22%. So you mean money that used to go into the colleges from the states have been cut? Is that
That's
what you
right.
mean? Okay.
Right.
What do you propose to be done to facilitate state-federal partnerships to lower college costs?
There's a variety of ways you could structure it. So you could create some sort of a block grant or other incentive for states to invest and get some sort of a federal match. And we've seen some proposals even in the last week that are looking at that sort of structure. We've also seen, for example, the president's proposal, and we've seen it mirrored here as well, looking at the America's College Promise that will actually provide a match, a 75% match for states who invest 25% above what they're already doing. And I think that's the key, is making sure that as we're thinking about federal investment, we're ensuring that states are continuing to increase their investment over time.
Okay, very good. I think I'll turn it over to my colleagues. I also note there's people that have been standing, and there's some seats. There's 2 seats right here in the front if people want to take those seats. I see you 2 in the back. And then right in the front row, you can go from the back to the front of the class. There you go. Does anyone else see any other seats? If you do, raise your hands. There's one right there if anyone wants to sit down. See that seat? And so why don't you guys just infiltrate the seats here so you don't have to stand. And then I'll turn it over to Senator Warren while you're doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to thank you all for joining us today, and I want to thank you particularly for coming here and telling your personal stories, talking to people about what's really happening and what it means to take on this kind of debt load. I just want to ask a few more questions around this. Mr. Sanchez, you said you were the first in your family to graduate from college. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you said you went to college so you could be a teacher.
Yes.
Why did you want to be a teacher?
I wanted to change lives.
I
was volunteering. I was working a 5 p.m. to 5 a.m. job in a grocery store. I worked in corporate. I dispatched trucks, and I would volunteer in my son's classroom after work for an hour a day. Started once a week, and then I was working 1 hour a day on Wednesdays, and that turned into 2 hours, 3 hours, 3 days a week, and I fell in love with teaching. I knew this is what I wanted to do, so quit my job and went to school.
It's a calling, and your 5th graders are lucky to have you.
Thank you.
I just want to ask about this, though. I understand that to get your college degree, you took on over $90,000 of student loan debt. Is that right?
That's correct, approximately.
Yeah, and that your first bills will come due in just about a month.
Yes.
And as a teacher, how much of your salary do you expect is going to go to student loan payments each month?
Almost half.
Almost half?
Almost half.
Your money will be going to your student loan debts so that you can be a teacher. Now, you have said that this pile of student loan debt has meant that you can't save for retirement, you can't get a mortgage, you can't get a car loan, and you feel like you're not going to be able to pay for your son's education, something that's a real priority for you. Have you talked with Andrew about your student loan debt? He's 10 years old.
Oh, I talked about it all the time with him. Like I said, in California, the student program last year took on Degrees Not Debt, the campaign that NEA put on. And with that, I went across the state giving presentations on Degrees Not Debt. And when it was opportune for him, I took him with me. So he's been through many of my presentations. He's probably been my biggest critic. But he's seen me deliver, he's seen me talk about, and he's seen the impact I've had. So he knows exactly about my loan debt. And like I said before, at 10 years old, he's trying to figure out how he can help me. He tells me, don't worry, Dad, I'll be rich one day and I'll pay for your student loans. And I mean, coming from a 10-year-old, I mean, and then he reverses it and tells me, had you not went to school, had you would stay where you're at, you wouldn't have any debt. So, I mean, what's that saying to future generations? That maybe we shouldn't go into higher ed and just do a blue collar or do it as a job in a grocery store to continue. And so that way, in work, just something that you're not happy with, so that way you don't have this debt.
Well, you've done exactly what you're supposed to do, Mr. Sanchez, for yourself and for your son. You followed your dream of becoming a teacher. It's the same dream I had when I went to college. You got the education that you needed to take on one of the most important jobs in this country. And now you and your son are suffering for it. You have played by the rules of the American dream, and now you are left struggling with debt. You know, I want to ask this question slightly differently. Democrats have introduced legislation to try to cut the costs for borrowers, trying to refinance student loan debt. So this is a question for our panelists who soon are going to start paying their first student loan bills. Let me start with you, Ms. Wood. From your perspective, what would it mean if you could cut the cost of repaying your student loans, even by a few $100s?
If I were able to cut the cost even by a few $100s, I know that that money would go directly to savings or, other things for the future.
Ms. Best, would you like to add something?
I mean, I'm in the same boat. In a way, though, I've already entered my repayment period. I'm taking advantage of the income-based repayment. So while I don't have monthly payments, I also have an extremely low monthly income. So my loans continue to build with the interest. I'm not making payments. And if there were a way for that to change or to make payments over a short period of time, like with the public service loan forgiveness, it would make a world of difference in terms of what I would feel able to do with my future. With retirement savings, buying a house, my partner has 2 children, so in a similar situation as saving for education, like we don't have any of that possibility right now with both of our low incomes and my debt.
And Mr. Sanchez, can I ask what it would mean for you and Andrew?
I would for sure start trying to save into a 403B because I have not started saving for my retirement. And also a couple $100s, I mean, it's not only saving for that, but also when I go to the grocery store, my son loves Oreos, buying him that extra pack of Oreos for him to have after school. Something as simple as that. I mean, people don't realize that when you're so strapped for cash, the little things make the biggest difference.
Well, I'm going to stop here and let my colleagues move next, but I just want to say Democrats have tried and tried again to move this bill to reduce the interest rate on student loans. As Senator Durbin said, there is much more we need to do. But this is at least a start, a very obvious place. And it seems to me this should not be a partisan issue. This should be something that Congress should want to do. All of us should want to bring down the cost of student loans instead of making a profit off the backs of Ms. Wood, Ms. Best, and Mr. Sanchez. We're going to keep fighting for this, but it is powerfully important that you come here to tell your stories and that you leave here to tell your stories again. We will magnify each other's voices, and that's how we will make change. Thank you.
Very good. Senator Baldwin. And we've also been joined by Senator Hirono from Hawaii.
I want to first ask about the consequences of needing to work during school, what you've experienced, and this goes to Ms. Wood and Ms. Best and Mr. Sanchez. Some of you have talked about working during school to be able to afford tuition or perhaps other college costs like books or housing, food, childcare. How did that impact the total time or the total amount of money that you had to spend in gaining your degree, either by reducing your eligibility for financial aid or making it take longer to complete your degree or any other ramifications that that had during your studies? Start with you, Ms. Wood.
So I had some work-study funds, and that was definitely helpful, and I had very enriching experiences working during school, but it was also definitely a challenge, and most of the money I made during my time working in college and in the summers went toward living expenses and books and things like that, so it was hardly enough to, really, take any kind of dent in the tuition and fees.
So my debt was all acquired during graduate school here in DC. While I was in school, I tried to find paid internships, which is nearly impossible, as many in the room may know. So I found a couple unpaid internships, but still had to make some money. So I had part-time jobs at restaurants, waiting tables, that sort of thing. And that, just covered rent or, utilities. It didn't even offset any of my educational funding because it just, was part-time, just enough to pay the bills.
Yeah, thank you.
For me, during the teacher preparation program, it's nearly impossible to work. Simple fact that I student taught for 8 hours a day and then had classes at night 5 days a week. So it was nearly impossible to work during that part of my education. And then when I went into my master's program, that's where most of my debt came from. I was substitute teaching, but $100 a day doesn't go very far, especially if you're on call and you don't know if you're gonna get work every day. Right. So really working during my education was nearly impossible.
Yeah, thank you. For Mr. Chopra and Ms. Mishory, I noted earlier about the federal Perkins loan program expiring on September 30th. And frankly, as I was noting earlier, it's extremely frustrating, in particular because there's bipartisan support for continuing the program, both in the Senate and certainly the year-long extension passed by voice vote in the House of Representatives. Can either of you speak to the importance of this particular program and what the consequences of this inaction, the failure to extend it, might be if we're unable to do so in the long run? I certainly am going to keep on fighting, but would like to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, Senator Baldwin, of course, lower cost loans are going to be critical especially for borrowers who might have to take out very high rate private student loans that don't necessarily have the same protections. Now, that being said, there are still improvements we can build on the Perkins loan program. For example, service members, teachers, the benefits of the Perkins loan program often conflict with the public service loan forgiveness program. So it's time we modernize our system and make sure that it's cheaper for borrowers to go to school and they don't get tangled up in red tape by their student loan servicer. And
I thank you for that and would note again that the Higher Education Act reauthorization intends, that's our intent. But I'm very concerned about the impact of students who are currently participating in the program when it's now expired. Any other comments? Thanks.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, Senator Baldwin. And we now have been joined by the Vice Chair of the Steering Committee, Senator Shaheen. And I'll turn over to Senator Durbin for questions.
Thanks, Senator Klobuchar. I was struck, Ms. Best, by the fact that your graduate education turned out to heap a lot more debt on. Give me an idea, undergraduate debt compared to graduate debt for you.
I got very lucky and got a scholarship to a state school in Pennsylvania, so I graduated from undergrad with very little loans, minute amount, and felt so privileged to be in that situation. And when I went to graduate school, I thought, okay, well, I don't have any loans, so, I can take out some, and then I'll go on to get a good-paying job. And, I graduated in 2010, and the economy was still not that great for good jobs, and it just,
Your debt was $70,000 for the graduate?
It's more than that now, yeah.
Okay. Mr. Sanchez, your graduate education, did it cost more than your undergraduate?
Yes, by far. I think my undergrad cost me about $25,000-$30,000, and most of it came from my credential program and my graduate studies.
Okay. This article that I recommend to you from yesterday's New York Times, in 2006, Congress extended the Federal Direct Plus Loan Program to allow graduate or professional students to borrow the full amount of tuition, no matter how high in living expenses. The idea was to give more people access to higher education, thus, in theory, higher lifetime earnings. But broader access doesn't mean much if degrees lead not to well-paying jobs, but to heavy debt burdens. This has too often been the result of plus loans. They're talking about law school. Georgetown University, which somehow I got into a long time ago, probably couldn't do it today, I think it's $65,000 a year for law school. $65,000 a year? When I ask the presidents of universities, why do you charge so much to go to law school? And they say, because we can. The students are applying, and they'll pay whatever we tell them. And they somehow dream that they're going to be NBA ball players at the legal equivalent when they end up with this. So what I tried to say at the beginning I want to return to, and I think Chris Murphy mentioned it as well, it is not just a matter of making these loans affordable to students. Thank you, Senator Warren, for twice bringing this to the floor with no help from the other side, I might say. But it also is a matter of coming to a day of reckoning with these colleges and universities, because they know they can get you, Ms. Best and Mr. Sanchez, at a graduate level, deeper in debt than you can ever consider at undergraduate. And we've got to start asking hard questions about whether or not this is a fair thing to do. Mr. Chopra, I want you to spend a minute, because you did a lot of work in this field. Explain to us what happens to students and to taxpayers when for-profit colleges go bankrupt.
Well, unfortunately, the students' lives are disrupted, and too often they're left in a tizzy about what's going to happen with their loans. Now, when a school closes, federal loans should be discharged, but unfortunately, many students have to deal with red tape in doing so. And there's a bigger issue, Senator, which is when those colleges are defrauding the borrowers. We already saw this in the subprime mortgage market, where borrowers were steered into products that were bad for them. And we need to do more to make sure that those borrowers are getting the relief, because that's what the federal law says, and we need to move faster so those people can continue with their lives.
So, case in point, I'm a student at a for-profit university, and I'm paying higher tuition than most places. They charge more. And it turns out most of my hours are not transferable anywhere. No one recognizes them, except maybe another for-profit operation. Now the school's going out of business, and I'm given two choices. I can keep the hours I've earned at this college and try to do something with them and keep the debt that went with them, or I can walk away from both, the hours and the debt. When I walk away from the debt, the ultimate loser then is going to be
the taxpayers
and the student wasting their time, but the taxpayers ultimately are the losers on these operations. And that affects the availability of student loan money for other people in other colleges and universities as well. The winners are clearly the owners of the for-profit schools, who took the original money from the loans and grants, turned it into income, compensation, dividends, whatever it happened to be when they were a for-profit entity. That, to me, is something that really has not been explained to the American people in terms of what this for-profit industry is leading us into.
Well, we already are trying to end with our financial institutions the concept of too big to fail, and we need to end with for-profit schools the too big to care attitude.
Thanks.
Very good. Next, Senator Murphy.
Thank you very much, Senator Klobuchar. Emily, thanks for being here today. Connecticut is actually one of the few states that's seen an expansion of the number of farms. We have a lot of young farmers starting small farms. And gradually, the popular sort of impression of what it takes to be a farmer is changing as people are realizing how complicated these businesses are and how a college degree is necessary today to be able to start and run a farm. So I wanted just to have you talk for a moment about the importance of a college education to be a farmer today. In a state like Connecticut, why a program like the one you're suggesting would be so important?
Well, a farmer has to do so many different tasks. You're not just driving a tractor all day, which is still a complicated task in of itself, but you're running a business. If you direct market to your customers, you have to figure out how to do that successfully. If you want to do a CSA, a farmer's market, sell to wholesale distributors, it's just very complicated from beginning to end. Where I work, we have 13 young people who manage our 35 acres. We sell to farmers markets, and it's a specialized crew. We each have different jobs that require different expertise, and I think all but maybe one or two of us are college educated, and you can tell that those degrees help us all put our jobs into perspective, into understanding how it fits into the overall business, and we each bring different skills and talents that we've picked up at college and at our previous jobs into the farming career.
Well, I appreciate you making that point. The legislation you're talking about, which in the House is the Young Farmer Success Act, piece of legislation that we're looking to introduce hopefully shortly in the Senate. It's a pretty simple piece of legislation, but makes an important value statement as well as providing some pretty important financial relief to young farmers as well. Mr. Chopra, can we solve this problem without increased accountability built into the Title IV program? Can we solve this problem without starting to weed out the bad actors from the good actors? This can't just be about putting more resources in. This has to be about a renewed effort to try to target these dollars towards the programs that really are providing quality degrees at an affordable price. And can we use public dollars to try to do both of those things? Can we use public dollars to try to drive down price and increase quality at the same time?
I think there used to be a sense that our institutions of higher education and the public had a compact, that they were both going to deliver for each other. There was going to be support from the federal government, but those institutions were going to live up to it. But too many are not. And I think you're right that we have to exterminate some of the worst practices that are out there because it's hurting real people and it's hurting our economy. Not enough poor-performing colleges are getting kicked out, and it's time that they do that. So I think you're onto something about both carrots and sticks. In some ways, we can more rigorously enforce the law, but we can also set up incentives for schools that are driving down costs and delivering really great outcomes.
Ms. Mishory, this is big business now, isn't it? College has become a source of enrichment and engorgement for the for-profits that are paying out big salaries and big dividends, and it really runs contrary to the way that we've historically viewed investments in higher education. Not surprising, because people who want to make a buck have found their way into almost every corner of the federal government, but the level of profit that are being generated by these operators at the expense of students, it's really a new phenomenon, one that that we have not yet fully tackled at the federal level.
I think that's right. I mean, we hear from students all the time who are impacted by, first of all, who may have been marketed toward and end up attending a school that is not providing them with a quality education. They take on the debt, they don't get the degree, perhaps they attended a failing school, and it ends up ruining lives. And it ends up ruining lives of a lot of students who are perhaps in vulnerable communities. And so we absolutely need more accountability for schools. We also need a more transparent marketplace where students and families can figure out which schools are actually providing good value. And so between those two policy solutions and investing more for low-income students, I think you then start to build a comprehensive plan on what higher education reform should look like.
One of the most stunning statistics about these for-profit colleges, and listen, there are some good ones, but unfortunately there are too many bad ones. The most stunning statistic is that the biggest for-profit colleges are spending more money on advertising and marketing than they are on the education of the students, right? Their biggest line item is not the actual delivery of an education and degree to the student, but marketing and advertising to get them in the door so they start paying tuition, 90% of that tuition coming from federal taxpayers through the Stafford and Pell Grant programs. Thank you, Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much. Senator Hirono.
Thank you very much. As also the first member in my family to go to college and using the federal work-study program to put myself through undergraduate and some loans, et cetera, for law school. And Senator Durbin and I went to the same law school. It took me 15 years to pay off my law school loan, and I was talking with my colleague here next to me. He's still paying off his loan. But when I went to law school, it was nothing like a $65,000 a year tuition. When we talk about providing equal opportunities for all Americans, what could be more fundamental or foundational than providing educational opportunities? And as we look at the income gap in our country, college is becoming less and less affordable. And as far as I'm concerned, it's like a civil rights issue. You know, who gets to go to college, and therefore who gets to go to graduate school, and up and down the line, those kinds of ramifications. So in Hawaii, we have a huge percentage of students who rely on the Pell Grant and other programs, but particularly the Pell Grant. And as you are probably aware, the Republican budget slashes Pell Grants and basically freezes the Pell Grants amount. And in the face of rising costs and the fact that the states are not supporting higher education through their university system, what kind of impact would this slashing and basically, you know, not increasing Pell Grants going to do to the schools that you are familiar with? And any of you can respond to this question. Well, we can. Did you?
Yeah, all good.
Mr. Sanchez?
With the Pell Grants, I know a lot of students that I went to school with relied on the Pell Grant. So I think it's going to only increase in the amount of students collecting loans to achieve a higher education. I know myself, I used the Pell Grant to go through for, I think it was through my community college and first year of university.
Yes.
And after that, they cut me off. I couldn't get in anymore. There was only so much I can collect, and the rest was loans. So I think it's going to increase in those students taking out student loans.
Well, we know that we should be increasing the programs and you're making it permanent. In fact, Ms. Mishory, I think you mentioned that there are a number of bills that would increase Pell Grants, would make them year-round, would also make them mandatory funded, and I think most of us are on those bills. I did have a question about Dreamers, and Senator Durbin has been one of the earliest, if not the earliest, supporters of DACA. And I did want to ask probably Mr. Sanchez, looking at your district in San Bernardino, where your school is located, there are some 17,000 students immediately eligible for DACA. Another 6,000 are under age 15, but could be eligible in the future. So the DACA students who are attending college, though, they do not have access to federal student aid. What kind of experiences do the DACA students have in your schools, and what their goals are for the future? Could you share some of that?
Sure. One of my good buddies actually is a DACA recipient, and he has to work 2 to 3 jobs in order to go through school. He's going to the University of Riverside, California. And he has to weigh what he wants to do. It's either go to school or help his family, or pay for his DACA, because he has to renew it every 2 years. So it gets expensive for him. So that's why he's working so many jobs. UCR is actually a very expensive university, and he's working, I believe, 2 jobs for that, and he's putting away, I forgot how much he's putting away, but he's putting away money for his DACA. I also have another friend who is actually outside of San Bernardino. He lives up in Sacramento, and he dropped out of school altogether because he couldn't afford to pay for his tuition anymore, since he is not eligible for financial aid. He again wants to be a school teacher, but he just can't. And he was a part of my executive board on the Student California Teachers Association, and he resigned from his post as he was the ethnic minority rep for the North to represent the ethnic minorities.
I think these stories are very important to bring up. Mr. Chopra, I think you also have some experiences with immigrant children in your
Yeah, Senator, I actually had the chance to meet so many undocumented students who were in college, and one of the most troubling things is they'll do anything to pay for college, including borrowing through their friends and family's credit cards, through getting exotic loan products, and this is just going to make it even tougher for them later on. And you know, the really ironic part is that offering certain federal loans to these borrowers is actually profitable to the government. And so we need to think about whether it's better to have these students, you know, taking out exotic loans or having safer products that will actually help them be part of a growing economy.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. I'm now going to turn over to the vice chair. And for those of you who think we can never get this done, just think that no one ever pictured that there'd be only 5 women senators sitting up here 10 years ago. That was not really a thing. And that is happening right now. It's probably never happened before. So I turn it over. So anything is possible to Senator Shaheen.
Absolutely, and thank you, Madam Chair, to you and Senator Warren for holding the hearing this afternoon, and to all of you for testifying here. One of the things that I have heard from students in New Hampshire is that sometimes it's hard to keep track of the loans that they've taken out because they may have public loans and private loans, and they don't have them all in one place. And so I wonder if the students who are here, recent graduates who are here, Ms. Wood, Ms. Best, and Mr. Sanchez, has that been an issue for the 3 of you? And do you both have public and private loans? And would it be helpful to have one portal that you could go to that could show you exactly what you have in loans and what you owe? Everybody's nodding. Who would like to?
Absolutely, yes. It's been a very confusing process trying to gather all of the loans and the different servicers. And I was pretty surprised that my servicer for my federal loans, Navient, has not, reached out or said anything. And as I've been kind of navigating repayment options, it's been pretty tricky to kind of find all those pieces.
Anybody else? Ms. Best?
So after I had my loans consolidated, now they're all in one place under the Nelnet servicing. I still find that slightly confusing. They're all in there, but I'm not really sure exactly like why some are at a lower interest rate, why some are at a higher interest rate. Like, I knew about the income-based repayment program, so I was able to find that on their website, but it was not like on their front page, like, hey, we have a solution for you. It was sort of like in small print on the side. And so, yeah, I agree it's been a confusing situation.
And do you have both public and private loans?
Just public.
And so you consolidated them on the National Student Loan Data System? Is that how you consolidated them, or is it through some other?
I think that's what I did. I think I received an email at one point, and my cousin actually works in higher ed, and so I said, is this what I should do? And she said, yes, you should do that. But like, I don't think that I or many other students would really know exactly what decisions they're making, like when they're making those decisions, and they affect so much of your life, but it's so unclear what exactly is happening. And even now, I receive letters in the mail from another servicer saying, oh, refinance with us. But I read the fine print and decided it wasn't for me, but like it looked really great. Their packaging was beautiful and looked so trendy. And so I thought, oh, this is worth looking at, and I feel like many other students would do the same thing, and then they'd realize they'd fallen into some sort of trap.
Mr. Sanchez, do you have a similar story?
Yeah, Senator, I also have Nelnet, and I figured that out because they don't really communicate very well with us. I got maybe 2 random emails as I was looking through my email, and never any phone calls, never anything to help communicate how these loans are working. I didn't realize how much I had until I filled out my exit for my loans. But there was never any communication as to what I got, what I was getting, or how I'm going to pay this back. It was just, here you go. And like I said, random emails.
Senator Shaheen, if I could add,
Please.
There's really a huge problem with navigating the student loan system, particularly when it comes to private loans. And there's 2 things we should quickly do. One, we should make sure that everyone in their exit counseling can get a copy of their free credit report. It should be more seamless, more integrated, so people have a full understanding of what they owe. And 2, we need to ramp up the reporting and data when it comes to private student loans. It's been an industry that has really operated in the shadows. We need to do better data collection, including potential integration with the National Student Loan Data System. And we need a similar law like the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act, which helps police discrimination, and better reporting by private lenders will help us root that out.
I'm so glad you said that, because I have legislation that would do just that. It would require the National Student Loan Data System to include private loan information. So I agree, we absolutely need that. Ms. Mishory, I know that your group has looked at the idea of institutional risk sharing. I think we ought to require institutions of higher education to have some skin in the game when they're issuing student loans. And so could you talk a little bit about some of the research that you all have done that shows what the impact of that might be?
Sure, and we've looked at a potential solution that has a number of facets. One being we need to make sure that we have a higher floor so that we're cutting off bad actors from accessing Title IV aid. The second is looking at doing exactly that, giving institutions skin in the game. So if graduates aren't repaying more than, for example, say, what a high school student would be able to repay, so making sure that graduates are doing better than a high school graduate, then that school should help with some of that repayment. And then the third is making sure that students who leave school and have attended a school that is failing, that they can actually move on with their lives, so that they get some relief, and they can also access financial aid once more. So we do think that it's an idea that's worth looking into to ensure that students are accessing quality schools.
That's great. And are those recommendations that you can share with the senators who are here?
Absolutely.
Maybe some people already have it, but I don't, so that would be great.
Absolutely.
Okay, very good. And Senator Warren had one more question here, and then I think we'll close out unless you have another question, Senator Verona. Okay, good. Go
I'll
ahead.
just be quick. I want to follow up on Senator Shaheen's question. Senator Shaheen was asking about the role of the Department of Education in dealing with student loan servicers and how we could have better help for all people who are trying to pay student loans. I just want to ask one related question, and that is, Mr. Chopra, what role can the CFPB play in helping borrowers who are struggling with student loan debt? How do they fit into the picture?
Well, I hope you feel that they already have started, and
Good.
I think the thousands of complaints that have been worked and gotten people refunds and rigorous enforcement is key, and close supervision is key, but I think more can be done. More can be done to collect data and enhance transparency, and perhaps more importantly, just like the Department of Education requires on bills and statements, the contact info for the Department of Education's ombudsman to file a complaint, the same should be true for other student financial products where there's a lot of problems.
Okay, so CFPB right now provides a hotline where someone can file a complaint if they've got a problem with their student loan servicers. There'll be a way to deal with those complaints through the CFPB, so they're trying to help out, I think, and strengthen what should also be happening over at the Department of Education. You know, I just want to say on this one, Republicans know that the fastest way to undermine the CFPB is to try to make it a commission, which is where they've headed now. The CFPB has recovered, as I've read here, hundreds of millions of dollars for hundreds of thousands of student loan borrowers. It does not make sense to weaken the CFPB's ability to fight for struggling student loan borrowers. And I want to say here, Democrats need to be really wary about Republican attempts to weaken the CFPB. We need to stand up to protect the CFPB's ability to fight for student loan borrowers. I just want to make one last statement, then I'm going to quit on this. You know,
Not really. You're just going
I'm
to
gonna
quit
for now.
today. Okay, I just wanted
Totally
to
right.
clarify that for the record.
That's right.
All
Thank you. Thank you. Because somebody might have been fooled. You know, we are now at a point where 1 million more students will be hit with student loan bills over the next few weeks. And as tens of thousands more exit their grace periods every single week, We are going to go back week after week to fight to help these borrowers. This is our job in the United States Senate, and we are not giving up on this. Like so many, this one is personal for me. I was the first person in my family to graduate from college. I went to a commuter college where the tuition was $50 a semester. That school opened a million doors for me. They gave the daughter of a janitor a chance to become a teacher, a chance to become a professor, a chance to become a United States Senator. But I never, ever forget how those opportunities were built. Those opportunities existed because I grew up in an America when this country was investing in its kids. I believe in that America, and I believe that is how we build a future for ourselves, for our children, and for our grandchildren. I believe we can do it. I believe we must do it. We are committed to be here.
Right.
I just wanted to ask.
Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this is a question that perhaps Mr. Chopra or Ms. Mishory could respond to. Republicans often use the Bennett hypothesis that federal aid causes colleges to raise tuition, and thus we should not increase federal student aid through Pell Grants, subsidized loan programs, et cetera. Is there any conclusive evidence for this claim? And if not, what are the main reasons that college tuitions and costs have gone up? But first, is there any credence to this notion that we should just end all these subsidies and all of that because it's just going to encourage colleges to continue raising their costs? Mr. Chopra? Ms. Mishory?
There's no conclusive research that these investments are increasing costs at public universities. And when we look at trends over the last few decades, we see conclusive analysis that states are not investing like they once were in students, particularly an investment per student has gone down significantly over the last few decades.
I would just also add that one of the reasons that student debt is rising is not just because of tuition, it's because families aren't making much more money than they were so long ago. And so it's not just about the cost of college, it's also about what families can afford. And so it's not just the $1.3 trillion. It's even more in home equity loans, even more in credit cards, even more of borrowing from family and friends. So it's not just about the borrowers on paper, but it affects all of us.
Yes, thank you for putting that into context. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, thank you very much, and I want to thank everyone, the senators. I think you can see each senator brought their own personal story, just like you three, today with them, because if we can't understand the situations of the people that we represent, we shouldn't be here. And as I was sitting there listening to Senator Murphy talk about paying off his loans while he's raising his kids, and Senator Hirono talk about being the first first person in her family to go to college, and Senator Warren's story of how she got to where she is, it's inspiring, and we all have those stories. The difference, though, as I was thinking about that, the difference was that, so my grandpa, he never graduated even from high school. He had to quit school to go to work and to pay for his 9 orphans, brothers and sisters, and he helped raise them. And then he saved money in a coffee can to send my dad to college. So I don't think your $90,000 is going to fit in a coffee can, right, Mr. Sanchez? So the difference to me when I think about those stories that we always tell about them growing up, and then my dad being able to go to a 2-year community college, which was basically free, and then he used that money from the coffee can to get a degree at the University of Minnesota, a journalism degree. My mom getting the teaching degree. I told you about my husband growing up in a trailer home with 5 brothers, his dad teaching college, but they didn't have money, so that's why he went to the University of Minnesota and to Indiana Law School. And just like these stories, the college he could almost pay for by being a night watchman. That sounds like something from the 1920s, but that's what he did. But then when he got to law school, that's when he got his big debt. And that's when I came in 7.5 years older than him and then had to help him pay off his debt. So, but the story is, while I went, it was only like $10,000 a year for a private college. it has escalated so much, even to my husband's time since then. So I think what you were saying about, number one, the escalating costs, and number two, the problems with getting these loans and having the state budget cuts, as you point out, Ms. Mishory, in your study. And then number three, just people's incomes not keeping up to be able to track this. And I just want to thank especially, well, all of you, but the three of you for being willing to share these stories. We all hear these stories at home, but we don't always hear them in this much detail where we can sort of ask these kinds of questions and figure out how you got where you are. So it's really helpful for us, and I know we'll all be using these examples when we speak about this issue on the floor, when we talk to our colleagues to try to convince them to come and help. And I'd like to point out that we have taken on one of the biggest issues of our nation right now in about an hour and a half as compared to another hearing last week that took about 11 hours on the House side. So we did it efficiently, but also I think with some passion. And to get this done, we're going to need to continue that passion. Senator Shaheen.
I just wanted to add a fourth to your top three, and that is when your grandfather and my grandfather and the generations that came before us were saving that money in a can. They could afford to do that because they can make a living without getting a college education, many without even getting a high school education. That is no longer true today, and that's why figuring this out is so imperative if we're going to continue to be competitive as a nation. So I just wanted to add that as a footnote on the other three, that we've got to do this not just for the individual opportunities for all of our students, but also because as a country, if we're going to stay competitive, we've got to make sure we figure this out.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you all of you for coming, and we look forward to working with you and getting this done in the future. Thank you.